Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for the District of Squamish on Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Hatsqualan Tlistluklamuk, Squamish Okmeo. I'd like to remember that we are doing this work on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting, Victoria Ray. I'm Andrew Hamilton, councillor for the District of Squamish, acting mayor for the month of December. So I have the pleasure of chairing the Committee of the Whole meetings. And with that, we'll get started. I would look for a motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Mayor Herford, second by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to item 3, our first substantive item of the day, staff reports, the Darrell Bay boat launch feasibility review and information report. I'll pass it over to staff to introduce themselves and the report. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Council. Community members, my name is Sarah McJanet. I'm the Manager of Community Planning. And with me is Daniel Leonard, Vice President of Westmar Advisors, who will be co-presenting today and summarizing the key findings of the Darrell Bay Boat Launch Feasibility Review. Westmar Advisors were retained in late 2024 for this project, and Westmar specializes in coastal engineering and brings decades of project experience encompassing a range of facility planning and design for port and terminal infrastructure, marinas, small craft harbors, and foreshore infrastructure. I'm going to provide some background context for the feasibility review briefly, then Mr. Leonard will jump into the technical evaluation and the findings. So for context, the district, as you know, has increasingly turned our attention towards marine planning over the last 6 to 10 years. Our OCP recognized marine access as vital to support local community needs and our wider coastal economy. And while we updated the OCP in 2018, we completed a marine action strategy, which focused on the importance of enabling safe and effective access to coastal waters, addressing barriers and opportunities for business and recreation infrastructure to strengthen our marine gateway and while caring for coastal ecosystems, and supporting marine-based employment areas. And so once we updated our marine zoning in 2022, we then undertook a marine access review, which was informed by 12 months of in-depth community engagement and consultation to document ocean access needs, barriers, and priorities. And we also included a boat launch situation report and documented the all-season use and access challenges, boat launch needs and facility preferences, along with future planning and design considerations for launch site evaluation. So the boat launch investigation of the boat launch and barge ramp feasibility at Darrell Bay was one of the tactical recommendations in the marine access review, which was endorsed by Council. And this work aims to understand the potential for boat launching at Darrell Bay, which is one of several alternative sites for community within the community and an area that is not impacted by increasing sedimentation of the Mount Quam Channel. So just as a recap, the 2024 boat launch situation report, this was informed by survey results and interviews with local organizations, businesses, public agencies, and representatives of the grassroots Squamish Needs a Boat Launch Committee. And we reviewed the current state of launching. There is no predefined location for motorized launching within our adopted waterfront plans, and there are limited options on the downtown peninsula for boat launch integration that meets needs, including parking, anticipated growth in utilization of this facility, and established design criteria. And we know that launch capacity and associated parking are limited. We have a single lane launch in Squamish, and it's viewed as undersized and for the volume and concentration of peak users. It's an unmaintained facility. It's highly dependent on tides. And the boat launch does see a mix of motorized and non-motorized use, and as well as commercial and industrial operators for vessel launching, as well as project freight landing and launching by a barge. So for proper boat launching within that boat launch situation report, the Squamish Marine Access Review highlighted that a minimum 2-lane facility with proper parking is needed to reduce congestion, conflict, and launch and retrieval times, and exploration of the long-term facility integration and co-location at Darrell Bay was the top alternative site for a community launch by the community, given its proximity to the highway, the upland area for potential parking and protection from winds. So the last slide for me in terms of the study area, it's Darrell Bay is a unique area in our South Gateway next to Shannon Falls Provincial Park. There are several Squamish place names and landmarks in close proximity to Darrell Bay, south of the village of Squamish. The review area includes the terminal and the upland lots in the South Bay area. And the existing infrastructure there include a ferry trestle, ramp, floating leads, parking lot, upland access, and power supply. So the terminal itself is owned by BC and managed by the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. It's administered through a ministerial order, which transferred the administration to Mott for ferry terminal use for 60 years. And the entire area is about 4.75 hectares, and it's the area shown in red in the report and on the screen. It is a designated emergency facility in our Sea to Sky multimodal evacuation plan, and it's currently licensed for marine transportation service, providing access to the wood fiber site. There are adjoining areas, upland areas that are designated as road and controlled by the district. And to highlight our review focused on the South Bay area, which has adequate water depths and separation from terminal operations. And the North Bay was not considered due to steep shoreline slopes and insufficient water depths to accommodate boat launching. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Leonard for following technical input.
Westmar had to look at all parameters that could affect the feasibility of the site, and those include physical parameters, bathymetry, wind and wave, future flood potential. The bottom right-hand corner, you'll see an image which shows orange lines. So on the aerial image, you'll see floating leads, and those floating leads have chains that go in all directions to hold them in place. So that was one major physical constraint, as well as the bottom side of the site. There's a TELUS fiber optic cable that runs out of the shoreline there. So in addition to the physical constraints, we had to look at regulatory constraints. What permits would it trigger? What reviews would it trigger? And then we also had to look at the key issue is how can it operate with the use as an emergency ferry terminal, which is the intended use of the site currently. After looking at all of that, we determined that the site is feasible and we can mitigate most of those issues that I just mentioned. So we did complete a Med-Ocean study, which is to look at the wind and wave at site. And you can see that there is a riprap slope there that has been working well. So we determined that the wave conditions are suitable for a boat launch. You'll note that there are logs along the shoreline. So that is one key issue, that even though the waves are manageable, there would be a lot of maintenance to clear the logs out in an operating boat launch. The existing infrastructure there is of an age that it's timber piles just slightly embedded into the overburden. There's not very much overburden over bedrock, so any new cantilever piles for floats for a boat launch would have to be socketed into bedrock, and we'll talk about that a bit later, how that affects the cost. There is a high archaeological potential, which means that we'd have to do several reviews and have professionals on site during construction. There is fish and marine habitat present, obviously not very much in the riprap slope, but along the seabed. I mentioned the continued use of the ferry terminal. And then obviously the access into the site right now is restricted somewhat by the rail activity, which could lessen over time. depending on what happens with that rail line. So on the south site, I guess Sarah mentioned that a north site and a south site were evaluated. On the south site, we looked at two further options. One being on this picture, the left side and the right side of the access trestle for the ferry terminal. Just on the face of it, you can see that the right-hand side has much more space than the left-hand side. There's a building in the way on the left-hand side, and it would be quite restricted to get boats in and out of there. So on the whole, we determined that only the one on the right-hand side, option one, would be carried forward, and we would not look at option two any further. So sticking to what was the right-hand side, now the bottom on this image, we further looked at two options at this location. So the first one was just a single access way for the boat launch and wide enough to accommodate barges. So there's a float running on the top side of the concrete ramp. We have habitat offsetting on either side of the ramp. And the ramp slightly cuts into the existing parking area. And we looked at options for the upland parking area. So we came up with 60 total spaces and 40 trailer spaces. Option two was a slight variation on that, which was making the ramp wider and putting the float offset so you have one wide lane for barges and recreational users, and then a narrow lane that would only be for recreational users. So you'll see that it doesn't affect the cost very much and it provides more flexibility. So we used our in-house data using recent competitive bids for similar construction activities, and we developed an order of magnitude capital cost estimate. We'll show the detail in a minute, but the graph on the right-hand side is just to show that we're at the very left-hand stage order of magnitude. And as we get further along, the contingency will get less and the accuracy will get less to get more accurate as we move along. But right now it is order of magnitude plus or minus 50%. I guess we say 30%. There's different ways to talk about it, but order of magnitude is 30 to 50. So as I mentioned, we had two options for the ramp. You'll see that the costs are quite similar. There's a bit more cost for the wider ramp. The float is the same, it's just that the ramp is wider, so you have more fill. And then additionally, there's two layouts for the upland parking. One is more efficient than the other, but you can see that the cost on the upland side is not that different for the two options. And then adding it all up with the contingency, we put a range there at the bottom between 5.5 million and 10.5 million would be the upper and lower range. We also did a survey of boat launches in BC to look at operational models. And there's three primary models that are being used. The primary one is the government operated one, where this can also happen just with a municipality, just with the provincial parks, or in a collaboration like in North Vancouver between the District of North Vancouver and Tsleil-Waututh Nation at Wewichin Kates Park. So most boat launches, City of Richmond, City of Delta, City of Vancouver are all operated by the municipalities themselves. There is a private model at Porto Cove where BC Parks provides an operating lease to a private concessionaire that runs the boat launch and collects all revenue and uses the revenue for maintenance activities. And then a hybrid option is at Sewell's Marina in West Vancouver, where West Vancouver owns the launch and all of the ancillary activities, parking, staging for the trailers all happens in the private marina area. So moving on to next steps, certainly further engagement through the Squamish Connect portal with Squamish Nation is required. There are studies that need to take place, as I've mentioned, addressing the archaeological impact assessment, doing marine habitat assessment for permitting purposes. We're seeing that for large impacts on the seabed, DFO permits can take 18 months. So doing that early on is important. And then the other key one is doing traffic impact assessment, looking at the turns in from the highway into the site, engaging with CN about their future activities and how that crossing can be made safe. Sarah and team have been engaging with the Ministry of Transportation on how that shared usage of the facility can be maintained if there is an emergency and the ferry terminal has to be engaged. So that has to be developed further. And then obviously determining how the facility will be operated, whether you want to stick with just the municipal operated or whether there's other parties that might be interested in supporting you with operations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leonard. We have a few concluding comments before turning it back to council for questions and discussion. So we have established that the boat launch co-location is technically feasible at Darrell Bay. It is, as you have seen, it's costly owing to the required assessment. The fact that it's marine in water construction it's complicated. There's a lot of permitting as well as archaeological and habitat impact avoidance and mitigation costs. There are a lot of details left to confirm, which will require resourcing, and that is not currently budgeted within our financial plan. As we acknowledge the continued focus on critical and core infrastructure needs. In our real estate and facilities master plan, bigger picture, boat launch and associated parking are noted as a public realm use that requires improvement in the community. Public realm uses are generally considered for support, and there's an acknowledgement that they may be fulfilled either on public lands or through rezoning processes, with the recognition that some needs may be addressed by external entities or partners. Staff also wanted to remind council, in the marine access review, there are other identified alternative launch areas, notably in the Mamquam Channel, that still do warrant some review, and that is anticipated to be reviewed opportunistically when land use changes or redevelopment are contemplated. But in the meantime, the Darrell Bay launch feasibility review does offer some preliminary design, development, and operational parameters with initial costing that is a bit of a baseline for us from which to compare alternative launch sites. At this time, staff are presenting the report for information. We do recommend referral of the feasibility study to Squamish Ohomeo as a timely next step. The nation is engaged in ongoing land and marine use planning for Akatsum Howe Sound, and they're developing a marine use plan. And this is also an area of collaboration within our memorandum of understanding. So finally, subject to future intergovernmental consultations, both with the nation, but also in close consultation with the Ministry of Transportation and Transit, we would need to coordinate next steps in resourcing, including necessary further assessment, and also do more work to clarify the land and marine use authorizations and 10-year approval mechanisms. And as Mr. Leonard said, looking more closely at the operational model and funding approach before we would advance to any detailed design. So with that, staff will leave it there and welcome your questions now. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Council, questions? Councillor French, Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. first want to express how I feel that this report has delivered excellent value for us. It has delivered something that's way beyond my expectation of what our budget amount that got dedicated to this. So thanks for over delivering, in my opinion. I want to manage expectations around timing somewhat. And I'm wondering if we could get some insight into thoughts on how quickly, if we were to move ahead with the Darrell Bay option, we could actually have boats being launched at a facility. Could we move this forward in 6 months, or is this more like a 10-year initiative? Anything you could share about timing, I think would be helpful.
Through the chair, the question around timing is a tricky one because of the extent of consultation that is still required around the potential for co-location of a boat launch at Darrell Bay. Engagement, intergovernmental engagements with the nation definitely take time to hear back from them in terms of their inputs, and then work also with the province. There's a lot of conversation that would need to happen, but also further technical review. So as Mr. Leonard pointed out, traffic impact assessment, like for a potential co-location and integration of a boat launch use, there is additional feasibility work and assessment that would need to happen firstly. So we would need to sequence, like if there was interest and mutual support to advance on this with the intergovernmental consultations, then we would need to resource some further assessment work to guide any next steps. So it's really hard to give an answer right now, just around overall timing, because there are so many components that we don't have visibility on how they would play out at this time.
Okay, that's totally understandable. Curious about the references in both the report and the presentation to barges. When I take a look at our current facilities on the waterfront and what we have for barge launches and what we could potentially develop in the future, I'm wondering if, or what, how reasonable would it be to restrict barge use at this site if we move forward with it? Is that something that could be put in place to make this a recreational boating facility only, and basically not allow barges to use the facility?
Through the chair, these are interesting questions about joint use of recreational and commercial industrial use. When we did the marine access review, we did a lot of engagement on this specific question, and our surveys were extensive. We not only surveyed the recreational community of water users, but also did a lot of, we had a business specific survey, and we engaged with a lot of local businesses and operators around shared use. There was no specific consensus around shared use. I think it's something that can be managed. There's certainly a precedent for shared use. A good one is in Saanich at the Tallista boat launch, where there is shared use, and the municipality has guidelines around the commercial use and operations. There's also a fee for commercial use. So those joint barge and recreational facilities do exist. They can exist peacefully and compatibly with good management. At this point in time, we wanted to investigate the potential for barge accessibility jointly with a recreational launch to ensure that there's the most flexibility. And also because right now there's no other barge location and landing outside of obviously the terminals and the port there. And there's potential for that at Site B as well. But other than that, we don't have a barge lead formally. And that is our current unmaintained facility does see barge use. And often it's a challenge because it's not managed right now. I hope that answers the question. Thanks.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. In the boating community and in our discussions over the recent years, it's been pointed out often that we don't have a fuel station in Squamish. And in fact, some participants in the boating sector have suggested that this may be an opportunity. My question is, are there additional planning considerations that we haven't ventured into regarding siting a fuel station facilities at Darrell Bay? Is this something that would need further work? Is it realistic? Do you have some an initial, Mr. Leonard, initial thoughts about that scenario?
Thank you. I'll just say one preceding comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Leonard. When we just on marine fueling, when we did our marine zoning overhaul in 2022 to 2024, we did incorporate marine fueling within the M2 zoning that is associated with and a condition of use connected with marina. We also have some siting considerations. So within the M2 marine commercial zone within the Mamquam Channel, there's also a clause and a provision that marine fueling not occur north of Victoria Street, where the Mamquam or the new pedestrian bridge is going in. So something that would be situated in the southern end of the Mamquam Channel. Beyond that, we haven't considered marine fueling as part of this scope of work at Darrell Bay. That would be something that we would have to discuss further with the province, but that wasn't part of the scope right now. But I'll just turn it over for further insights for Mr. Leonard on marine fueling.
It would certainly be possible at the site, but as Sarah mentioned, that the likelihood that the province would want that risk on their property is probably pretty low. So that would be my main concern, is just the liability associated with it.
Thank you. It happens that my neighbor built the Darrell Bay terminal, and Mr. Berner, George Berner, and I grew up with his knowledge because his grandson and I used to visit the pit where he got all the gravel for that terminal, and it's where the gondola base is today. So a gigantic volume of fill was trucked from that site across the highway and further south to Darrell Bay. In fact, that facility probably has between 3 and 10 meters deep of gravel on both sides of the railroad track. My question relates to the observation that there's a high archaeological potential. And I wonder if you might be able to, Ms. McJanet, explain or give some orientation as to how we proceed from an archaeological overview assessment view of the situation and a look at the site history. And it seems to me a little bit, I'm in disbelief that we would spend $100,000 on an archaeological impact assessment in looking at up to 10 meters deep of gravel, because I see that the footprint and the lot lines and whatnot, there's very little undisturbed site here. I wonder if you might be able to give some orientation on this question. I have raised it also with the province in connection with the review of current Heritage Conservation Act legislation, and they have assured me that a professional archaeologist would advise, based on site history, against that if that was in that professional's professional judgment, if you like. But I'm just baffled by the idea of spending $100,000 on an archaeological impact assessment on a gravel pit, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Through the chair, we really appreciate the historical nuggets. And thank you for sharing those elements. On the question of archaeological sensitivity and impact assessment for the site, notwithstanding that there is historic fill in that area, it doesn't preclude us from doing our due diligence around archaeological impact assessment. The extent and depth of that assessment would obviously be guided by a professional archaeology team. Overall, for Darrell Bay, what we understand through the archaeological overview work that we're doing right now with Squamish Nation is that this area does have, just generally speaking, high potential. There are a number of landmarks and place names in close proximity to this site. So we, within the foreshore and in the vicinity, we would definitely want to take a closer look at that. Whether or not we would need to do some more of a project-specific AOA or archaeological overview assessment, which is more desktop, or get right into field assessment and an impact assessment. We would have to determine that. But we wanted to be conservative, so we included a more fulsome amount for the technical review there. In addition, what we've seen also is that in terms of chance find and monitoring projects in areas of really high potential, there are costs connected to monitoring as well, and having field crews on site during construction for chance find management. So we were conservative with the budgeting. It may be likely that there may be less impact if the site history does have substantial fill. One other insight from our archaeology team that we're working with right now is that in and of itself, areas with fill are not necessarily, and disturbed sites are not necessarily not likely, because we don't know necessarily where that fill came from. And sometimes there's things in fill that's imported and moved around as well. So anyway, great insights that we're getting through our work. And Mr. Leonard has something to add too.
Yeah, I would just note that the piles that we're showing are rock socketed, which means that we have to put them down to bedrock, and we have to extract the soil that's between the bedrock and the seabed surface. So that doesn't have any fill on it. So there is some soil that's historic that we would be having to extract out of the piles.
Thank you. I hope my colleagues and the public might appreciate that my concern is that archaeological impact assessments and these investments be well targeted. And we do have a lot of areas that could use that investment. And there's also risk involved with project scheduling and this sort of thing. My final question relates to the staff recommendation, which in item number 2, as we have before us here, it includes not only engaging or referral to Squamish Nation, the administration, the council, but also the Inchikai Development Corporation. And in speaking over the years with the council members, they are quite insistent that the Inchikai Development Corporation is a distinct business and quite separate from the governance of the Squamish Nation, and are quite surprised in another case of a referral, as we have actually companies, including First Nations companies, that are competitors to Inchikai Development Corporation here locally. And it's just a matter of protocol, whether, in fact, if there is to be a referral, that might happen via the Squamish Station rather than directly to that company. Thank you. I wonder if you may be able to comment on that as protocol, Ms. McJanet.
Thank you, through the chair. With the proposal to refer the feasibility review to Squamish Nation, including Inchikai, we fully acknowledge Inchikai as a business development arm for the nation. When we do, in terms of protocol, when we do our referrals, all referrals go through the nation's Squamish Connect portal. And internally, those referrals are forwarded to a variety of divisions and entities within the nation as a matter of course. So in terms of economic considerations, often the Inchikai group are referred within those referrals. We wanted to be inclusive, and also the boat launch and the facilities it supports a broader marine economy for the community. Also, Enchikai, their business arm, they do have expertise given they manage many marine facilities and assets of their own, including moorage, lift and dry, storage and vessel services, etc. So we know that they do have insights and can provide also some good input to the process. So we are wanting to be inclusive. We will be submitting to the nation through the Squamish Connect portal. And then through that, there's opportunity to engage with Enchikai as well. But really, it's directed by the nation through the governance arm, or the governance through the portal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stoner, and then Pettingill.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks for the presentation and the work. I'm just curious if you have any examples of the hybrid partnership models that are just exclusively a boat launch. The ones that you provide in the report are all attached to a marina, which typically to me makes it more economically feasible. Do we have any examples of that hybrid model where it's just a boat launch?
I don't. I mean, we have the Porto Cove example where the whole facility is handed over to a third party, but the Sewell Marina is there is an example similar to Sewell's Marina in Oak Bay where the municipality Oak Bay owns the launch and then the marina. Similar situation.
That makes good sense. Thank you. And then I think this is a question for Ms. McJanet, where we kind of think about like what the next steps are. And I hear that there's some questions around timeline for engagement and intergovernmental feedback. But I'm just curious about like our role as a district. You've spoken a little bit to some of the constraints that we have, both from a budget as well as a capacity perspective. And this falls pretty squarely in the area where we support, we don't necessarily lead. I think one of the concerns that I have, and I think our community would have, is that just means that this stalls for 10 years. Like there isn't anybody leading it. But I am curious about how we potentially enable somebody in our community, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit entity. If we did want to look at just like handing over a lease, do we have other interest in Darrell Bay? Is that something that we could just do and like encourage somebody else to take this on? Like how do we... I think if I'm being very frank, I don't see this happening from a district-led perspective in the next 5 to 10 years, given the number of demands in our community. It doesn't mean that I don't want it to happen. It just means that we need to get creative on how we do that. So how do we enable other folks to come to the table and take leadership in this space?
Thank you for the question and the comments there. I would say, yeah, we fully acknowledge the challenges and the priorities that as a community that we've set, and the fiscal challenges that we have as well. I think that in terms of enabling, one of the key things was doing this technical feasibility. So this is a really great first step in terms of trying to answer that question. A lot of people have been pointing to Darrell Bay as a potential site for co-location. We wanted to physically and technically examine that. But then at this point, I think we need to take it back to kind of larger discussions around facilities and master planning and priorities. And so that's really something that happens at the council table. I'm not sure that I have great guidance in this moment, just as a kind of an individual in this larger organization. I think that's just a wider question for us. So it's an important one. And we are guided by our facilities master plan right now, and then our strategic priorities. But in terms of the stalling out, we can, I think beyond the technical feasibility work, keeping the conversations going through engagement and the consultations will be important. We are focusing that consultation on the governmental side firstly, and just an acknowledgement, we haven't done wider community engagement. The community knows that this was a high priority investigation. through the marine access review. But beyond that, we haven't engaged with like adjacent landowners or the wider community around this. So we are just sort of trying to tackle what we can within the budget that we have, piece by piece, and progressively making progress, hopefully.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think if I can get a little bit more specific with my question of, is there an opportunity, say if there was, like, I appreciate that this feasibility assessment puts us with a little bit more knowledge that this is doable. Like, is there a partnership model? Is there an RFP model that we could just go out and say, hey, Darrell Bay looks like it would work. Does anybody want to take it on? Like, is that something that we have the capacity to do or would be able to do? Or is there reasons why we would maybe not do that because of other considerations at Darrell Bay for our own use or other uses for the community?
I'll do my best to answer the question through the chair. I think that that's a question that is best answered in terms of like expressions of interest and putting that opportunity out to the community. That's not something that planning can necessarily answer that, because it's a broader discussion piece, I think, with our real estate group and the organization. Right now, in terms of other uses, as you know, the primary use is the marine terminal area within the ministerial order, and that maintained terminal and emergency access facility. That's kind of the primary use. And just to highlight also in our engagement with the province and their concessionaire, that is sort of the most important use to maintain there. So co-location of a launch, as long as it can continue to respect that emergency facility operational aspect, that is kind of the primary consideration. But other than that, we've got a temporary parking pilot going on down there where there's licensing for parking that supports marine transportation. But other than that, we don't have another kind of competing use for that site. And that's in part why this was an important one to investigate. There are adjacencies and adjacent uses, but that South Gateway area, it is unique and an opportunity. So, but on facilitating future opportunities, I think that's something that we'd have to take back and discuss with other parts of the organization.
Thanks very much. We've got Councillor Pettingill and then Mayor Herford. And just a reminder, we are coming close to our end of our time on this. So just keep your questions to the point. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe building a little bit on some of Councillor Stoner's questions. I'm sort of assuming that the reason municipalities are so often involved is because these things aren't sustainable from user fees. But I want to check that. Are there models or examples where, regardless of who's managing it, user fees would cover all the operations typically? Or is it something that in most cases we've seen it does need to be subsidized by taxpayers?
You are correct that it's mostly subsidized. I mean, there's parking fees and there are boat launching fees, but whether those can, obviously you have to guess the demand you're going to have, and you have to see how big the demand is, and certainly there's a lot less demand in the winter months than there are in the summertime. So it would be, getting to the other question, it would be challenging, I guess, to put it forward as purely a profit-making exercise.
Okay, thank you. And then we talked a bit about limiting barges potentially. Do we have more general abilities? Like if we want to say, hey, taxpayers, it'll be expensive for taxpayers. There's limited access, so we want to prioritize local taxpayer access. Is that something we can legally do? Or if we are the rules such that if we were to open it up, it's really got to be a first come, first serve type of thing, no matter where you are?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, there are examples where there's resident and non-resident pricing. So I actually took a closer look at the facility at Kate's Park, the Waywichan boat launch. So that's, again, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and the District of North Vancouver that have a partnership there and operate that facility. So that's a year-round launch. Their rates, they have daily rates, and then they have a yearly rate for residents, which is about $100. So if you're curious, daily rate $26 to use the launch and park there. Yearly, it's $222 for residents and $340 for non-residents. So there are examples where there is kind of a pricing differential between resident pricing and then visitor parking, visitor usage and pricing. So I can give that example. Yeah. Oh, and do you want to add to that?
I mean, I think the key thing would be making the geometry such that a barge couldn't use it if you really didn't want barges to use it. I had a meeting once with the city of Vancouver at the Vanier boat launch, and while we were there, a 100-ton crane showed up and parked itself on the boat launch, and a barge came in and they started unloading floats, even though that's not allowed. So if the geometry allows it, unless you have someone on site full time, it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. And just if I understand what self-managed means with the existing boat launch, the community sort of organizes itself. Is there any consideration or reason why we couldn't consider something where we just build the infrastructure and almost walk away and sort of let the community self-organize and figure out how to manage it?
Through council, it's always good to have rules of engagement. So I think in terms of some of the launches I've seen where you have that joint use, this is more specific to your question about barge use and recreational access. The Tallista boat launch on Vancouver Island is a good example where they have posted rules and regulations for commercial use, including the times that it can be used. So there's a clear expectation amongst users about what time the launch will be available for commercial use versus recreational. Often for launches that are really tidally dependent, you've got a sort of a crush of users that are trying to work with the water levels and get access. And when you don't have adequate facilities, that becomes a real challenge. But I think there are examples out there where there are kind of rules and regulations, self-parking, pay parking, and some enforcement where they operate well. They seem to operate well without a lot of active oversight. But I think you do have to do good engagement, understand how people are wanting to use the site, what is the geometry, what's going to function well. And a lot of it's probably going to, eventually you'd learn a lot and then refine your rules and regulations as well. So hope that gives a little bit of guidance in terms of examples.
One last, and this is sort of to help me understand where to maybe go next. It seems to me there are certain things that we would have to be involved as a facilitator or sort of engage the primary engager with Squamish Nation and the province, and then some architectural assessment stuff, we probably need to be involved in. Is there a way where we can sort of split up next steps? And I think this is a bit to Councillor Snorr's point where we sort of articulate, these are the pieces that we will need to manage, and here's how we're going to move forward on that. And here's the pieces that the community can start moving forward on, because, fundraising or whatever is going to take a while. And so is there a way we can start moving on these things in parallel?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, there are many different elements that we need to continue to work on. We didn't want to propose additional assessment in this meeting today without taking the next step first around the intergovernmental consultations, just to see what input is coming back from there. But certainly we can follow up with council once that engagement has happened to identify the results and what we've learned and the inputs that we've received. There are opportunities. As I said, this is a public amenity and facility that's identified in the real estate master plan. We can also, bring this back for further contemplation. If there are, or of the next steps, the technical feasibility that we highlighted, there's archaeological, there's habitat work, and then there's also a piece around the traffic impact assessment. And I think the traffic impact assessment will be a key piece for our further engagement with the province around the use. So it could be that would be one of the next ones that we might recommend in terms of sequencing, but I'll just see if Daniel Leonard has anything further.
I agree with all that. I mean, the other one would be to convince your MLA to rezone the property as a BC park, to make it more aligned with having a boat launch, because most boat launches in the province are in BC parks. So.
Thanks very much. Mayor Herford.
I was just pondering that last suggestion. Thank you for that. Some of my questions have been covered around the fees and just what the potential is there to cover the expected annual maintenance and repair costs, and I appreciate that section of the report. I'm wondering about like if there are design things that can be done, or how you balance the construction cost against the sort of annual maintenance costs. I'm sure there's some design choices you make that make it more or higher or lower maintenance, and just how you approach that or how that was approached in this project, so I can best understand the context of the annual maintenance costs in relation to the capital investment.
Yeah, so I'm fully aware that it's easier for municipalities to get capital funding as opposed to operational maintenance funding. And with respect to boat launches, it has gone back when you try to pay more upfront with capital to minimize maintenance. So the example is at Vanier Park, where the city of Vancouver had some lighter floats that required replacing every 20 years. And a decision was made, well, we don't want to replace it every 20 years. We want to build a more robust float system that is made of concrete. But what happened was the bigger floats attracted more loads in the waves, and they actually broke apart and ended up in the harbor. And so, you have to walk that balance with the wave conditions, that it's better for lighter structures to ride over top of the waves rather than to act like breakwaters. So, we're constantly fighting that battle of finding the right balance between something that is light, that is going to fit for purpose, and you don't have to worry about it every storm, versus heavier things that are more challenging.
Okay, thank you. It seems to me that the decision on the operating model would be down the road somewhere. But where do you see that in the order of operations? Or should we sort of choose a goal that we're working towards achieving, or is that a piece that we would be best to wait until the project's advanced further down the path to figure out how it's operated?
Through the chair, that is a really interesting question. The operating models and examples, I think we would want to do, firstly, we would want to do more of a deep dive on the pros and cons of those models, and hear from and investigate and speak with the municipalities that are operating those, or leasing out area, or working with a private concessionaire. I think it would be good to do that. I think on the tenuring piece and the discussions with the province and the ministerial order, that will also come into play in terms of what form of operating model would be the best fit given the circumstances for Darrell Bay as an emergency operations or an emergency facility as well. So I think it's early to say what model we might try to we would prefer necessarily, and do more investigation around that and more discussion on the intergovernmental side.
Okay, thank you for that. Last question, if I can, Chair. There was a mention of what wasn't included, which was washrooms, and I just wondered, what utilities are on site if that was something that we wanted to pursue as this advanced, and were there anything else of note that wasn't included? I'm thinking lighting, and I don't know what other things would be there, but I just want to make sure I understand the scope.
Thanks for the question. In terms of servicing down there, Darrell Bay is serviced with power, but there's no other SANI or water down there.
Other than for the houses that are there, right? So there is service, but it's not being taken advantage by the province right now.
And I think you had a second part to that, and the washroom
Well,
facilities.
yeah, I was asking about the services for what in relation to the washroom facilities, so I can kind of get an idea. So there's something nearby that we can tap into. It's not a kilometer run of something to happen. That's one piece. And another piece was there anything else that was sort of out of scope, but probably the next thing? So whether that's, I mean, you highlighted washrooms, but I don't know, lighting, secure, or I don't know, some sort of office to run, or I don't know, whatever other pieces. What would be next pieces that others have that may not have been included in the scope?
Yeah, so we have included lighting, we have included allowances for signage and repaving and planting upland. So it's pretty all inclusive except for a building. Yeah.
And Chair, I'd move the staff recommendation if you're ready for that.
Yep, I think we're ready for that. Thank you very much. Mayor Herford moves the staff recommendation. Councillor Anderson seconds it. Mayor Herford, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you so much for this work. Over the years, we've heard aspirations of the community that this is could be a good spot. And it's nice to have that validated and and understand the order of magnitude that we'd be looking at to advance the project. And this really, I think, is just so critical to understand as we move in, as we try to address our complex challenges that manifest themselves in capital. So thank you so much for that, and I look forward to next steps on this at the appropriate time. So thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of moving pieces here, and I hope that we're going to be able to maintain momentum and working within a holistic planning approach, because there's a lot of different facilities and different facility users to take into account together as we move forward. I'd like also to offer a point of information regarding barge facilities. We actually have 2 new barge facilities in our harbor. West Bar has constructed one, and Blackmount Logging has constructed one at Watts Point. Squamish Terminals, in fact, does not have a barge facility. And back in 2009, they proposed to the province that a emergency car ferry dock should be built at Squamish Terminals, and that Squamish Terminals would offer to pay for half the cost of it. They would like a barge facility. It's a long-standing desire on the part of Squamish Terminals, and I'm sure that that offer might still be of interest to them. And it's something that it speaks to the value of having a comprehensive marine plan so that we can be ready with these suggestions and introduce stakeholders to each other. But in fact, Squamish Terminals does not have one, and might still entertain working with the province to have a car ferry over there. It is a scenario for the future. Thank you.
Councillor French, and then Councillor Pettingill.
Thanks, Chair. I too support the recommendation and the motion in front of us, and will put some emphasis on the word momentum. This report has been much anticipated by our boating community, and I think well received in the last few days, with a significant amount of interest in the report itself through internet posts that I'm aware of. This is a great start, and I hope that we'll see momentum carry this through to the point where we can find some partners to get involved with this and hopefully make some applications for grants to get some money in place to press it forward.
Councillor Penningill?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to support this. I think it does seem that this step is a necessary next step before we go too much further in anything else. But coming out of this, I would really like to have a conversation about, what things we can are sort of deal breakers for us, and what things we can, what things we must be part of, like relations with Squamish Nation and so on in the province, and then what pieces we can let go of, maybe operational models and so on. Maybe we don't need to be, if we're going to allow the community to manage this, we can be more flexible on operational models, and we don't need to analyze those pieces. So just with an eye to, how much can we work in parallel with the community, just knowing that we're going to have capacity constraints that makes it hard for us to deliver a boat launch on the timeline the community want. What can we do to make it easier for the community to step up where it can? But again, I think a touch point with Squamish Nation does need to come first, and then let's figure out how we can work in parallel.
Thanks very much. Councillor Greenlaw?
Thanks through the chair. I just wanted to say thanks for all the hard work on this. It's really nice to see this report coming through. And building on some of the comments made by my colleagues here, absolutely collaboration with a nation and any touch point with a nation is absolutely a top priority. And I think another obvious collaborator would be wood fiber, who I believe is the primary user currently. And that's an obvious way for them to contribute to our community, especially with their deep pockets from fossil fuel industry, unlike our very shallow pockets as municipal governments. So I let this be a call out to them that this could be a way that they can contribute to our community, and hopefully some collaboration with staff can happen on that. Our community's been limping along for a long time with the existing boat launch. And I think our entire community would be happy to see this amenity updated. Oh, also bathrooms are a must. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Any further comments? No. So just a few comments of my own. Absolutely very grateful to see this moving forward. One of the points from Councillor French early in this conversation, I really appreciated the amount of detail and work that came into this feasibility analysis for the budget that we assigned to it. I think we're getting a lot of good value for money on this feasibility study, and it's a very important first step for us to define next steps and have a clearer view of how we build these capital projects into the financial reality of our current budget situation. So thank you very much for that. I do agree that the Darrell Bay is a very sensible place to put a boat launch, and that collaboration engagement with the Squamish Nation is an appropriate next step. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor of the staff recommendation? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. With that, I'll be looking for a motion to terminate, which I believe went to Councillor Stoner, seconded by Mayor Herford. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now we're on to our next meeting for the day. I apologize to the chair of the next meeting that we are 3 minutes late.
I think we let's take some time between. We'll start the special in 5